With the overwhelming success of Iron Man, Marvel Studios proved that they were more than just the little engine that could. Their next ambitious target was producing multiple films that would assemble into a single team-up blockbuster. But getting there was nothing but growing pains. Marvel's design-by-committee philosophy and commitment to release dates hampered the efforts of all their filmmakers, resulting in a Phase 1 that was rocky, chaotic, and certainly a shit show.
There was an idea. The idea was to bring together a group of remarkable people called the Avengers Initiative.
What started as Stan Lee 45 years ago, coming with this idea to put all the heroes in one story, and what continued about 6 or 7 years ago with 3 or 4 of us in a room saying, wouldn't it be cool if? And now here it is. It's pretty amazing.
Rewind to 2003 and the release of Ang Lee's Hulk. Lee's attempt to literally make a comic book come to life was ambitious, but it left audiences slightly bored and, frankly, with that ending, confused. Universal was lukewarm to the idea of greenlighting a sequel. Then Marvel Studios president David Maisel appeared in February of 2006. He paid Universal to bring Hulk back into the Marvel fold, since he was Marvel's second most popular creation, under Spider-Man of course. Universal's one condition was that they got to distribute any film where Hulk was the central character. By the way, this is why there will never be another solo Hulk movie. Around this time, Maisel was in a power struggle with the head of Marvel Films, Avi Arad. Arad had been the right-hand man of Marvel Enterprises president, Ike Perlmutter, since their takeover in 1997. And Arad had produced nearly every single Marvel movie and TV show since. Yet Arad's methods ran opposite of what Maisel was trying to build. Perlmutter took Maisel's side, so Arad left the studio, just as Iron Man's production was ramping up. Though he didn't go far, choosing to start his own company producing non-MCU Marvel films. With the shakeup, Maisel was promoted to chairman of Marvel Studios, and Kevin Feige became the president of production. In July 2006, Marvel hired Louis Leterrier, of the Transporter franchise, to direct Hulk with writer Zach Penn, who had frequently written Marvel adaptations, including an early draft of Ang Lee's Hulk. Hulk would be rebooted, which was so the style at the time. But because Bruce Banner's scientist-turned-rage monster origin had been previously tackled in 2003, and the TV series in 1978, it was decided to skip it altogether. In early 2007, Penn left the project when Edward Norton was cast as Banner, beating out Leterrier's choice, someone named Mark Ruffalo. Even though Norton was notoriously known as a difficult control freak, rewriting scenes, fighting with directors, and re-editing final cuts, he was another prestigious get for Marvel. But Norton's contract gave him a lot of assumed creative input, including letting him write a final draft. Leterrier actually encouraged Norton to do the rewrite, because Marvel gave him the job with a hard deadline release date and no finalized script. Once filming started, the screenplay still wasn't settled, so Norton would write every day on set. Norton was a big fan of the Hulk, and his relationship with Leterrier was very collaborative. But it all went to hell once the editing started. Norton and Leterrier were aiming for a cerebral character study, but Maisel and Feige wanted a tight action thriller. After all, ponderous dialogue scenes were what sank Ang Lee's version. The debate turned into outright arguments, where even Leterrier found himself feuding with Norton. Eventually, Marvel put their foot down. Over 30 to possibly 70 minutes, depending on who you ask, of the quieter, dramatic moments were cut, including the opening scene of Banner attempting to commit suicide. Leterrier laments that while the first half of the movie is his, the second is very much Marvel's. Fueling the fire, the Writers Guild refused to give Norton a screenwriting credit, giving Penn full ownership.
I tried to be like you. I did a big action movie called The Incredible Hulk. You know what went wrong? I wanted a better script. I thought maybe we should try to make one Marvel movie that was at least as good as the worst Chris Nolan movie, but what the hell was I thinking?
The Incredible Hulk was unleashed on June 12, 2008, just over a month after Iron Man's massive opening. In a reverse from 2003, Incredible Hulk was criticized for too much action, not enough character. And the box office didn't make up for the higher cost. Today, the film is mostly remembered as the MCU's black sheep. However, it does contain the first moment audiences would see that these films were connected with Tony Stark's cameo. Marvel had yet to come up with a grand plan for all these films. They asked Leterrier to just shoot a single scene that set up a grander universe with very little instruction. So Robert Downey Jr. and William Hurt just improvised the entire thing, which explains why it doesn't make a lick of sense in the larger context of the MCU. But the message to audiences was loud and clear.
What if I told you we were putting a team together? Who's we?
3 days after Iron Man hit theaters, Marvel immediately announced a sequel for April 30th, 2010. Negotiations to bring everyone back, though, wouldn't be so easy. It took 3 months to get director Jon Favreau to sign on, as he was concerned about barreling through another big-budget production with Marvel that would once again have a firm release date, but no script. For Robert Downey Jr., Marvel was willing to shell out $10 million to keep him around, 20 times what he was previously paid, because the first film's success rode on his shoulders. But this meant the infamously frugal Ike Perlmutter was going to squeeze every penny out of production, starting with Terrence Howard. Howard was the highest paid person on Iron Man, earning $1 million, but this time they wanted to pay him far less.
It turns out that the person that I helped become Iron Man took the money that was supposed to go to me and pushed me out. They came to me with the second and said, look, we will pay you 1/8 of what we contractually had for you because we think the second one would be successful with or without you.
Wow.
And I called my friend, and he didn't call me back for 3 months.
Right. How are things now with your friend?
Oh, I love him. God's gonna bless him.
In October of 2008, Howard walked, and Don Cheadle replaced him.
Didn't expect to see you here.
Look, it's me. I'm here. Deal with it. Let's move on.
When Perlmutter was told, he allegedly said audiences wouldn't know the difference between the two black actors, as they all look the same. This wouldn't be the last time Perlmutter's bigotry hindered proceedings. With Downey and Favreau locked, they wanted to explore Stark's notorious alcoholism. Hell, it's one of the reasons Downey was such perfect casting. But Marvel was skittish to the idea, and asked they don't draw focus to it. Downey and Favreau again kicked around ideas with Shane Black, but Marvel brought on Justin Theroux to write the script. He was a personal suggestion from Downey, as the two got along swimmingly during Tropic Thunder. As they worked out the story, the Marvel Creative Committee, the handful of Marvel folk who ensured faithful adaptations, were eager to build out this film universe. They were justifiably excited by the amount of control that they had over their properties, something they sorely lacked in the last decade. So they forced Favreau and Theroux to put in more world building into the sequel. Suddenly, a S.H.I.E.L.D. plotline with Nick Fury and Black Widow was being wedged into the film. Drafts went back and forth, and before they knew it, Iron Man 2 was filming yet again without a locked script. Things were changing on the fly so rapidly that Theroux at one point fed Sam Rockwell his lines via an earpiece. When Favreau reached the editing room, the puzzle pieces were so scattered, including multiple beginnings and endings, he relied heavily on Stark's AI, Jarvis, to fill in the blanks.
You haven't been able to tell the story in camera, and whatever CG hasn't worked, and then you've had reshoots to try and explain this. You can just have Jarvis go, the bad guys are coming over the mountain, and you're done. So it was a great job because everybody was really happy at me for doing a very easy thing, and they gave me money, which is always nice of people.
Mickey Rourke worked closely with Favreau and Theroux to flesh out his character Ivan Vanko. He went to great lengths for the role, like spending time in a real Russian prison. But Marvel made Favreau cut most of it in favor of the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff, which Rourke did not take kindly to, calling out Favreau for not having the balls to stand up to Marvel.
If they let you play the bad guy with other dimensions other than one-dimensional, then you have to fight for that. If you're working with some good studio guys that got some brains, or you're working with a director with a set of nuts that'll let you incorporate that, then it's fun. Otherwise, you end up with what happened on the Iron Man.
Almost all parties came out of Iron Man 2 bruised, exhausted, and troubled about continuing on with Marvel. On May 7th, 2010, Iron Man 2 blasted into theaters. Financially, the film was a smash, making more than the first. And at the time, reviews were generally positive. And who could say no to more of Downey's Tony Stark? But opinions quickly changed over the years. Today, it's widely considered one of the weakest MCU films. And most of that criticism is aimed squarely at the overabundance of world building that led to an uneven and unfocused film. Rumor has it, Favreau felt the same way. But to him, at least it was the next step in what he really wanted to do: direct the Avengers. The same day Marvel announced an Iron Man sequel, they also laid out their promised slate of films leading up to Avengers. Following Iron Man 2 was Thor, set for July 2010. A gamble to say the least. The first 3 MCU films always had one foot firmly planted in reality, but now they were going to bring in a literal god from outer space. Not only would the God of Thunder's own Shakespearean story need to land with audiences, it also had to make sense if he were to rub elbows with Tony Stark. Like all the other Marvel IPs, Thor's rights were kicked around multiple studios, with numerous failed adaptations. In the early 90s, Sam Raimi stood side by side with Stan Lee to pitch Thor to 20th Century Fox, only to receive blank stares.
We had planned to do that. We'd co-write it together, and he would direct it because I was too busy.
There was a very short-lived idea of making it a TV show, and in 2004, Sony Pictures and Avi Arad tapped Blade screenwriter David Goyer to adapt it. But David Maisel stopped the deal, choosing to pull the hero under their newly formed Marvel Studios banner. In August of 2007, Marvel put Matthew Vaughn in the director's chair, who just knocked it out of the park with the fantasy adventure Stardust. For nearly a year, he worked with I Am Legend scribe Mark Protosevich on the script, but Vaughn opted against moving to the US for such a long shoot. Marvel then came extremely close to signing indie darling Guillermo del Toro. Both Pan's Labyrinth and Hellboy was enough proof he was right for the job. But before the deal was signed, the eagle talons of Warner Brothers swooped him up for The Hobbit. Then an unlikely email came to Kevin Feige from actor-director Kenneth Branagh. Mr. Shakespeare himself wanted the job. Marvel quickly signed him in December of 2008, but at this point hitting that 2010 release date would be impossible. Marvel delayed the film a full year to give Branagh enough time to finally get the project off the ground. With Branagh at the helm, many actors were eager to sign up. Again, Marvel bagged some heavy hitters like Anthony Hopkins and Natalie Portman. Finding a Thor, though, would prove to be a chore. Marvel straight up offered it to Daniel Craig if he wanted it, but with the Bond franchise, he thought it too much. Branagh then cast a wide net for unknowns. He saw Tom Hiddleston for the part, but decided he was a better fit for Thor's brother, Loki. And he was right.
Come on. What did you expect?
On the shortlist was Liam Hemsworth. That's right, the other Hemsworth. The Australian TV actor, Chris Hemsworth, bombed his audition. While filming Cabin in the Woods, he told writer-producer Joss Whedon about it, and Whedon made a personal call to Branagh to reconsider. Feige arranged a second screen test, and Hemsworth was obviously perfect. Despite multiple script revisions from multiple writers before filming, as productions go, Thor went without any issues. And that was largely thanks to Branagh's decades of experience. Though like before, a lot of character moments were edited out. And one great running joke.
Another! This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another! 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 Another!
Thor fell to Earth on May 6th, 2011. While entertaining, the film is a bit unbalanced, with most feeling cold toward the cosmic royalty, but basking in the earthly human drama. And with a $450 million worldwide take, it showed Marvel could launch a franchise without a household name as the star. Like Thor, Warner Brothers was about to buy the rights to Captain America, which David Maisel also stopped. And when Marvel Studios first kicked off, Kevin Feige wanted Steve Rogers to be the headliner of their new venture.
I'm not sure we could have done this notion of an interlinked Marvel Cinematic Universe without Captain America. The notion of a superpowered human started with Steve Rogers. He is the backbone of the universe.
Problem was, to the general public, Captain America was a very absurd character. There were 2 shoddy TV movies in 1979, and the direct-to-video movie in 1990, produced by Menachem Golan. The less said about these, the better. And since the overly rah-rah America character and period setting were considered a little old-fashioned, they elected to see how well Iron Man and Incredible Hulk performed first. Before directing Iron Man, Jon Favreau had a conversation with Avi Arad about doing a Captain America movie, but more as a comedy. Feige understood that the property was objectively silly, but it needed to be taken seriously, as Cap was the leader of the Avengers. Marvel enlisted director Joe Johnston, a veteran of VFX-heavy adventure films, including one cult classic set during World War II about an unlikely superhero fighting Nazis. Johnston hired 2 screenwriters who would turn out to be the unsung heroes for the entire MCU going forward. Christopher Markus and Stephen McFeely likewise wanted the audience to root for Captain America, even before he becomes a superhero.
We needed to fall in love with skinny Steve Rogers before he ever became Captain America.
And never forget that he's in there.
Yeah.
The duo's complete admiration for Cap not only provided Marvel's first lock script before production, they would also become the sole writers for all 3 Captain America films, and eventually Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. Production itself went well, outside the VFX work to make Chris Evans a 90-pound asthmatic. The painstaking process required each scene to be filmed 4 different times, one with Evans, one without, another with a stand-in, and once with Evans in front of a green screen. The biggest problem, though, was just getting Evans to agree to the part. Marvel was adamant that Evans was to Steve Rogers as Robert Downey Jr. was to Tony Stark.
When we really distilled the core qualities that we wanted out of Captain America, I think there's a moral fiber to him that really isn't something that you act, that it's something you need to possess. And Chris Evans was someone who seemed to inhabit all of those qualities the most. So everyone was in love with the idea of Chris, except Chris.
Evans had barely come off of 2 less than stellar Fantastic Four films, and was looking at Marvel's 9-film contract with extreme trepidation.
The only reason there was hesitation to begin with was because of the commitment. It's a big movie, and those are the movies that if they succeed, there's a change, a lifestyle change. And if it fails, it's a whole other can of worms.
After he declined, twice, Johnston and Feige were about to give John Krasinski the part. But after a motivating phone call from Robert Downey Jr., Evans overcame his fear and agreed to a 6-picture deal. Captain America: The First Avenger received a warm welcome when it awoke on July 22, 2011. Maybe a tad messy or uninspired, it had a solid core, with a unique period setting, fun tone, and most importantly, Evans' soulful performance, especially the time given to Skinny Steve. It was time to pull off Marvel's Endgame, the nigh impossible dream Kevin Feige and David Maisel envisioned years before. Outside of a few crossover horror films, never had a film studio brought together multiple franchises into a single movie, and they were about to put the film into production before audiences saw Thor or Captain America and decided they even liked them. It was a daunting task, one that could blow up in Marvel's face. When looking for a director, the assumption was that it would be the guy who started all of this, Jon Favreau. Yet after Favreau fought for a raise to make Iron Man 2, Ike Perlmutter refused to pay him that much again. A reluctant Feige was forced to find someone else. But with that lemon came some remarkable lemonade. Marvel appointed Joss Whedon. Understand that today Whedon has become a toxic and problematic figure. But when this announcement was made, the reaction was pure elation. He was a comic writer and a script doctor for years. He excelled at ensembles with his TV shows, and his first feature direction of Serenity all gave him an immense amount of geek cred. Plus, Perlmutter liked how little he could pay him.
We have amazing artists and technicians that can help with the scale. But what the filmmakers need to do is to sort of not get lost in all of that and focus on the great character work. And the big danger of the first Avengers was just getting overwhelmed with action. And we knew there'd be plenty of that. But the most interesting thing about the Avengers is why in the world are all these people in the same room together? And what would they do? And Joss Whedon showed that the character would not get lost amongst the spectacle.
Initially, Marvel had Zach Penn on Avengers. For 4 years, he sat with all the other filmmakers writing an MCU Bible and developing a big payoff event film. But when Whedon took over, he tossed all of Penn's work and started with a page 1 rewrite. In a surprising turn of events, Marvel actually gave him complete control, as they had no idea how to do this. His only instructions were that the Avengers needed to fight each other before fighting the true villain Loki in New York, the home of Marvel. Inspired by the Dirty Dozen, Whedon relished the idea of writing a big-budget clash of personalities. Once he nailed down the story, he was allowed to polish up Captain America's script to help it flow better into Avengers, and shot the end credit scene for Thor. Whedon also cast Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye, which allowed Branagh to quickly insert his cameo during Thor's reshoots. The only hurdle left to overcome was Edward Norton. Norton met with Whedon and negotiations started with Feige. Somewhere in this process, things got ugly, and Kevin Feige released a rather snide statement as to why Norton would no longer be playing the Hulk. Our decision is definitely not based on monetary factors, but instead rooted in the need for an actor who embodies the creativity and collaborative spirit of our other talented cast members. To Norton's credit, he has since downplayed that particular comment and rumored feud as Marvel defending their brand, and holds Feige in high regard. Second choice Mark Ruffalo stepped in, after Robert Downey Jr. convinced him, of course, and was announced on stage during that now iconic San Diego Comic-Con panel.
This cast is more than I could ever have dreamed of working with. My dream team. This is the Avengers.
With Whedon's free reign, production went smoothly, though the logistical nightmare of executing the Battle of New York was one of the most costly sequences ever put to film and took months to get right. As an added bonus, Whedon, on a whim, threw Thanos in the end credits. Feige wanted the MCU to go cosmic, but at no point did they consider Thanos or even Infinity Stones. Whedon just loved the character, had no plans for him, and let Marvel work it out from there. And 2 days after the film's LA premiere, Whedon shot the Shawarma scene, based on yet another ad-lib from Robert Downey Jr.
You ever tried shawarma? I don't know what it is, but I want to try it.
The Avengers assembled on May 4th, 2012. Joss Whedon had pulled off the impossible. Not only did the merging of different film universes work, but it was exciting, funny, and everything comic book geeks could have asked for. And it crushed at the box office, making over $1.5 billion, becoming the third highest grossing film of all time. Kevin Feige, David Maisel, and Marvel did it. They willed a dream into reality. They categorically stepped on some toes and burned a lot of bridges, but they proved what a combined cinematic universe could be. It undeniably changed Hollywood, with every other studio wanting their own team-up films, yet not one has been able to replicate this success. Marvel was king of the world. But pride cometh before the fall, as things were about to get much worse.
Ants! Ants!